First and foremost, I have to say to the messaging, malware, mobile, anti-abuse working group, a very big thank you on both my own behalf and also on behalf of my team here in Lyon at INTERPOL, and also, of course, officers who work all around the world, who work with our team all around the world to tackle the whole area of child abuse or internet facilitated child abuse. You know, when I started this work many years ago, I started to work online around 1997 or 98. And when I started working through working on IRC and on Usenet, on news groups, I could never have imagined how big it was going to be. I remember very clearly thinking to myself that sure, this is an easy problem. Sure, this can't possibly be a huge problem. Unfortunately, of course, it has got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I've been working here in Lyon for the last 10 years, and we've built the team from 2 of us up until 20 of us. And around the world, we run the ICSA database here, and around the world we have 50 countries connected to that database. And in those 50 countries, of course, there are sometimes 2, sometimes up to 10 officers working on this crime issue, or we call it a crime issue, of course, but for most of us now it's become a social issue. For the likes of the MAAWG, I would say it's also an abuse issue. And it's something I'd like to maybe talk about later on, is the fact that, you know, sure, child abuse material is a content online, and so internet companies providing the wires and the tubes for it to work might not necessarily feel that they are responsible for it. But I would argue that child abuse material and child abuse in general is a social issue, and therefore it's all of our responsibilities. It's not just the police, it's not just me, it's not just my team, it's everybody. So I'll come back to that in a second, because I want to just talk literally about that, the effect of, you know, over the years people are becoming to realize more and more that this is a problem. The penetration of the internet has allowed this, what was a small cottage industry, if you like, to be spread to a much wider audience. That wider audience consists of many different people. Some of them are people who have a preferential sexual attraction to children. And some of them are what are called situational, or people who find child abuse material and just collect it for whatever reason. But regardless of why they do, the internet has just facilitated it hugely. I mentioned earlier on that I used to work actively online in the likes of IRC or on Usenet or whatever. And then, you know, as the web gained ground, the World Wide Web gained ground, it suddenly brought it out to kind of a mass level. And this created the environment where you were looking at your newspaper online, and suddenly you were getting pop-ups for child abuse material. And that could never be allowed to continue. And there's been enormous work done in the last 15 years to deal with that. It's very important, say, for example, that I mentioned InHope here, and the alliance of hotlines all around the world. In the United States, you have the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children who work very hard in that area. CyberTip CA in Canada, the IWF in the UK, Hotline.ie in Ireland. There are many hotlines in countries all over the world, and all of those are umbrellaed by an organisation called InHope. And if you go to inhope.org, you'll find a list of them. And this gave members of the public an opportunity to report what they were seeing. So this was one aspect of it. The Financial Coalition got organised, out of, I think it was the National Centre for Missing and Exploited Children organised it. the Financial Coalition, where basically the financial houses, the main people like Visa, MasterCard, American Express, basically said, you won't use our systems to access child abuse material. And that was really, really good. That combined with police action, with members of the public being less likely to click, and indeed work done in spam, because reducing the amount of spam going around meant it was less likely that people would click through spam messages that they were receiving, because they weren't receiving them anymore. So really and truly a great deal of work was done to drive it off the open web. And that was and is a fantastic thing, because it really reduced and took the commercial exploitation of children off the internet, in effect, off the internet, the main internet that people could see. Of course, it hasn't gone away, because it has always been that the vast majority of this material, the vast majority of it, like 95% of it, is exchanged like for like. There's no money changing hands. The currency is actually the pain of the children themselves. Now, when I talk about child abuse material, it's very important that you realise, and I think I've made it very clear in every talk I've ever done, I'm talking about pre-teen children. I'm talking about children aged under 12 years of age, certainly pre-teen, and unfortunately more and more as pre-speech children. So we're dealing with extremely young children, and we're dealing with abuse. I'm not talking about posing. I'm not talking about soft focus and sexy lingerie. I'm talking about full-on child sexual abuse. And the challenge for us constantly is to get the new material as quickly as we can. So if we forget even for a second about those who abuse networks to distribute the material, those who abuse storage systems to store the material, so in the modern iteration of it being the cloud or whatever, they're storing material there. From our perspective here at Interpol, what we've been trying to do is to be victim-centric. And what that basically means is the acknowledgement and understanding that in every single one of these pictures and every single one of these movies, there is a real child. And so that philosophy means that even from a policing perspective, we have to come away from the catching, the whack-a-mole type work of the catching of this guy for possessing or that guy for distribution, and more start thinking about, well, who is this child and what work can we do as law enforcement to identify that child and thereby stop the abuse. And we've had enormous success. We run the database here, as I've said already, we run the ICSA database. It's the International Child Sexual Exploitation Database, but it's colloquially known as the ICSA database. And we run that database here, and these 50 countries connected, plus NECMEC and Europol, and we feed in all the material that's been found in searches and seizures. We work very closely with InHope so that the hotlines are also feeding into this victim identification work. And we analyse the material, and where possible, we get an investigation launched in a country to identify the child. Right now, in the work we're doing currently, we're averaging about 6 kids a day in the world. That work that's being done, not necessarily here at Interpol, but around the database that we house, and the work that's been done here among the team members here in Lyon and all around the world, we're rescuing. There's about 6 kids a day being rescued. Now, what has that got to do with you? You might say. I mean, what has this abuse got to do with you? As industry people, as systems administrators, as abuse team operators, I think it's very important to say that some companies, especially some of the big online platforms, put a lot of effort in to ensuring that their platforms are not being abused. Unfortunately, it's not enough of them. Only some of them are. And I know some of you believe and agree with me when I say that we really ought to be building safety in from the start. So when these new platforms are being created, when these new apps are being created, when these new services are going online, we should absolutely be building in. We should know, we should acknowledge that bad people will use these systems. Rather, bad people will abuse these systems, these apps, these platforms to do bad things. And if some thought is given to that at coding stage, then it is possible to actually stop it very early on. Now, I said there are some great companies out there doing a lot of work in this area who are spending a lot of money, who are investing hugely in stopping this abuse of their networks. There aren't enough. It is my opinion that anybody who has a network has a responsibility to ensure that that network is not being used for bad actors or by bad actors. And in some ways, and I'll put this out there, in some ways I would argue that child abuse material or grooming of children online or live remote sexual abuse are three particular areas that every systems administrator should be happy that his systems are not being used in this way. They're not being used to propagate child abuse material, to give access to children for nefarious purposes, or to allow live streaming of sexual abuse. Because that's the new frontier right now, is the live streaming of child sexual abuse. We're seeing more and more live streaming taking place from, again, it's a kind of a exploitation of children in poorer regions of the world that's being streamed into the living rooms and homes of the more developed countries where people are relatively wealthier. Creates enormous challenges for us. I'll talk about it again another time, but it is the new frontier. And if you, as a systems administrator, are allowing your system to be abused to allow any of this to happen, I would argue that you're being negligent. Why would you scan for malware on your systems and not scan for child abuse material? Why would you scan for, why would you ensure that you're leaving no open relays on your mail servers and not being sure that your mail servers are not being used to transmit or to store child abuse material? So this is an argument that I would have for industry. And as I said, and please don't get me wrong, you know, there are some wonderful examples out there of very big companies with very big platforms who are very maturely and responsibly managing this issue. But for every one, there's 10, 15 or 20 who are not. So look, hash values, we'll make them available. The internet, the InHope will make them available. There's all sorts of internet help groups out there. There's the Thorn Technology Coalition, where there's hash values are being shared. Doesn't have to be law enforcement hash values. They can be industry generated hash values. There's plenty of advice out there. Lots of police officers who are getting more and more used to this issue. And I would ask all members of MAAWG to educate yourselves a little bit about what the issues are and to ensure that your systems are not being abused for it. So finally, just let me say again the enormous personal privilege it is for me to accept this award, the Mary Latinsky Award for the work that I have been doing for many years. But I'm not accepting it for me, I'm accepting it for my colleagues. I'm accepting it for my partners in InHope, Hotlines all around the world. I'm accepting it for investigators who spend many, many long hours in basement, windowless offices with poor equipment, going through the grind work involved in separating the wheat from the chaff to ideally rescue children who are currently undergoing child sexual abuse that is being filmed, and photographed and shared for nefarious purposes online. So again, that's who I'm accepting it for. So when I heard that MAAWG had decided to give me the Mary Latinsky Award, it was, of course, an enormous surprise, a very happy moment for me. And I went online to see about this award. What is this award? Where does it go? And then I see previous winners of the award, or previous people who got it. And I see names like J.D. Falk or Brian Krebs or Rodney Joffre. And I think, wow, this is a very serious award. And when I see Jane Hitchcock getting it for the enormous work that she does, the background work she does, and then I started to realize how really good this award was. Some of the people who have had it in the past I know, Neil Schwartzman, somebody I would consider a great friend, and a really good guy who gets it, who understands the work we do, and who does his best within his own sphere to ensure that people are aware. But it's an enormous privilege. It's an enormous, all I can say is thank you very, very much. I look forward to seeing you all soon. And finally, a very big thank you to Chris, to Linda, to Jerry, and of course Neil. Thank you all very much, and again, enormous privilege. Thank you very much.